Welcome back, everyone. It's another night of Talk Openly. My name's Jack, and I'm here with my excellent friend Daniel. And we are Sangha members at Lions Road Dharma Center in Sacramento. And
And oops, and what? You cut out there.
oh, did I? Okay. Oh, well, it's great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I'm
It
so
does
happy to
say
be here with you.
suddenly, yeah, it does say suddenly that my connection is unstable. So we'll see how it goes.
You can see I
Um,
actually turned a little bit red there for a second. I was like, "Oh my gosh, is this on my end? What's going on?" A brief moment of panic on my end.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. It'll work out as much as it needs to, as much as our karma will allow, right?
Yes, yes, indeed.
Well, Daniel, we're talking tonight, the second of our four-part series on the four opponent powers practice of purification. Um, and last time we talked about regret, and I felt like that was a really great conversation for me. And tonight we're going to talk about reliance in the second half of our show. So we're going to keep the ball rolling on the four opponent powers.
I'm so glad. And Jack, I have to express my deepest gratitude to you for bringing up this topic
Mm,
and for allowing us to spread it out over multiple weeks. It has given me the opportunity. I actually never, up until we started talking about this, never ever did I intentionally practice the four opponent powers. In
yeah.
fact, I'm not even so certain I had even heard of them. Um,
Okay.
or whatever. It never sat with me, right? It never like got penetrated into my mind. And so it's been really amazing to watch how these four opponent powers, when practiced regularly, yield benefits. And I'm
Mhm.
so grateful because being able to sit with this week after week and think about it gives me the opportunity then on a daily basis to practice it. And my goodness, it feels good to be purified.
Yeah, doesn't it? I'm glad you said that because I also feel excited that we're doing this because I've gotten into a regular practice of it now, where I end my day with kind of reflecting about my day. And kind of and something that's really nice about that just in general is that typically I like go through my day and it's like I'm tossing it in the trash can. Like, unless there was something that really stood out to me, I have a terrible memory. And so this is really helpful for me just in that sense,
Yeah,
where I'm like,
yeah.
I'm thinking about the day, I'm having to go through, okay, what was that stage of the day? What was that one? What happened in there that I could have done differently? What happened in there that I felt good about? So just kind of like reflecting and so that part's been really nice. And then, yeah, just like kind of what I've been noticing is like these consistent patterns in my behavior that I'm like, okay, that one's one that I'm thinking about.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
then like the next day, what I do is because I write down, I journal a little bit, and it's not like a whole journal entry. I just kind of do a bullet point like divisive speech or laziness, and I'll kind of just very broad categories about it. And so then in the morning, I'll reflect, okay, those were the things that I dealt with yesterday. And so today I'm going to be a little bit more conscious about those ones. Um, and sometimes when we get to the very end of the four opponent powers, we'll be talking about, oh gosh, what's the word? Resolve, where you kind of resolve, to not do the action for a certain amount of time. And so sometimes I'll set myself, even just a few minutes. I'll be like, okay, don't be distracted or don't be lazy for like 3 minutes.
Oh gosh,
you
what's
know.
the word? Oh, there we go.
um,
Resolve.
oh, it's starting.
It wouldn't be a show if I didn't do that.
uh, so that's been interesting is to kind of like set myself these little goals for my day based off of the things that I did yesterday that I would
Right.
like to do differently today. So yeah, I think it's just such a important practice.
I'll tell you, I enjoy it so much that I brought technology into it for
Oh
myself.
yeah.
So I created a custom GPT
Okay.
called the Four Opponent Powers GPT that I took all the sort of a bunch of source material around the Four Opponent Powers, dropped it in there, and I said, the instructions are that you're going to help the practitioner, whoever it is, in this case me, to navigate the four opponent powers, right, and to practice them.
Mm.
And I find it, I've actually been moved to tears, kid you not, by
Oh.
interacting with that particular model because there's doing it on my own, right, and just sort of reflecting, and that's really wonderful, and that's by and large how I do it as a regular practice now, right? But to start with, I was using that, and it was really, really, really helpful for
Oh.
helping me to see sort of, one of the things that I recognized was that mm, sometimes, I might be engaged in a pattern of negative behavior. And I might know, well, it's not the best or whatever, but I don't really know that I regret it.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
and so like there's been a couple of times
Right.
where I'm like, hey, help me understand, what is it why would I regret this? Like what's the harm being caused by this behavior, right? And it's
Yeah.
really beautiful. It's so sensitive and it goes through each one of the steps and it even sometimes includes a little like little tips about a little Vajrasattva practice or whatever. And it's extremely just wonderful and helpful, right? So I've been that's one way that I focus on it. Like when I'm trying to focus on a particular practice or study or something, sometimes I find it helpful to use various technologies, and it's just one way
Sure.
I do that. And I gotta say, man, it's just been wonderful. So
That's
that's what I'm
great.
just my heart is overflowing with gratitude to you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's one of the benefits of Sangha is that we can share these things with one
Yeah.
another. And maybe you can share that for Opponent Powers GPT
Yeah. Yeah, I
at some
would.
point. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
sure.
Cool. Well, how else is your practice going and training?
Oh my
What's been going
goodness.
on?
Ah, it's so good. So it's going well. I have plenty to work with. Uh, so that would seem to be a negative, but it's not.
Yeah.
I got enough material to work with in my life for practice. My training has been really on point. I think I mentioned last time that our teacher had recommended that I extend my meditation sessions and make it a little bit longer.
Mm,
So I've been doing that and really really getting after it. And it's been super duper helpful. And I wanted to tell you a quick story
yeah.
about what happened on Sunday. This is just a cool story. So I went to the meditation practice at the temple, and Lama Jimpo was teaching the meditation class or leading it rather, right? So we sit and we just right away. He just doesn't say anything, he just dings the bell, right? And we all sit and meditate for a while. It was really nice. And then he says, how many people would like to hear some meditation instruction from me? And how many people would rather just get back to meditating?
Mm,
And you can guess, most people raised their hands and said that they wanted to hear some meditation instructions. I didn't. I said I just wanted to keep meditating, right?
mm,
And
mhm,
what was funny is that the reason why that I wanted to just keep going was that I had been noticing, I was noticing in my breath that I was like, oh my God, Daniel, you're not actually with your belly breath, you're not completing the out breath. You're going back in before it's actually out. And it was a
mm,
weird sort I was like, noted, I was like, oh, look at that. And so I was kind of like, I was like, what do I do? Okay, how do I work with this? Okay, so then he ignores my request and he provides some meditation instructions. And he was saying, he said, one of the problems people say, oh, I don't have time, Rinpoche, I don't have time. I can maybe do 6 minutes here or oh, every other day or whatever. And he was like, if this is a chore and if it's anything other than a delight, something that's wonderful that you look forward to, you're doing it
mm,
wrong.
mm.
It's as simple as that, right? Like it's not supposed to be hard. I mean, it's not supposed to be like a task on your to-do list.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he was talking about how a lot of times the way that people meditate and that they actually are not doing it properly, and therefore it is not it's using up too much of their energy. And he's like,
Mm,
it should be an energy restorer or replenisher, right? But instead, for many people, meditation can be a drain, right? Because they're
hmm.
fighting their thoughts, or they're doing some kind of thing that isn't actually recommended for meditation.
Yeah.
And Jack, do you know what he said?
Out breath.
He said, many people will take their in breath before the out breath has even completed. And it
Did you
shook
start
me.
cracking up?
I was like, what in the world just happened here? What is this?
Uh-huh.
And so then he says, we've all had these experiences, but I was just like, okay, that's wild. This is crazy. So,
Yeah.
so, so then he says, okay, so, it's like he's describing it like a wave. And he said, notice, like, if you're visualizing a wave, yeah, the wave crashes, right? And, and it even maybe begins to recede, but you have to notice that if you really watch a wave when it crashes on a beach, watch the wave go, and some of the water actually goes, it just falls deep into the sand. Like it just goes, it sinks into the sand, right?
Mm,
That's the completion of the wave. It sunk all the way down, right? And I've been practicing that. Like I sort of visualize it a little bit, but I've just been practicing full, deep, complete cycles the way that he described. And
mm.
it's been amazing. It has been such a shift in my meditation, such a tiny little, just a little
Yeah.
bitty thing, right? That shifted, and it made a massive change in the way that my sits feel. I'll give you just an example. This morning,
Yeah.
up, I had a tremendous amount of physical anxiety, not mental, right? There was nothing really going on up there. But my body, I was just shallow breathing in the chest, and I couldn't, I was like, man, I can't, I feel uncomfortable. It's like a
Mm,
tightness in my body here. And so then I just did that, right? I really focused on doing the complete breath cycle, right? Just the way you described. And about 10 minutes later, all the physical anxiety dropped. And then at the end of the meditation, I got up and I was like, wow, that's a huge shift between how I entered and how I exited.
wow.
Yeah.
How
Isn't
cool.
that neat?
It's very magical. Yeah.
I
Yeah. And that
swear
is
he reads people's
yeah.
minds. I
Oh,
swear.
definitely.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that he does. There's some way that
There's
he's,
something going on there.
you know, it's interesting to think of that, like what that feels like in my body to imagine the bits of the end of the wave sinking in. And there's a way that my belly just kind of like relaxes. Like it kind of, I don't know, just like this seeping kind of sand feeling, this relaxation at
Yeah.
the bottom of the breath rather than tighten,
Hmm.
like it's not like a, because I think sometimes I think of out breath as like, like
Yeah.
kind of like exhale and it's like, oh, like tight. But that's actually like really like gentle and just kind of like, okay, we're just sinking, we're not tightening.
Right.
And then it,
That tightening is actually what he was saying, is the tightening is what is basically, he said, it kind of is like you're saying, like, even if you're not consciously thinking this, it's almost like you're worried that maybe if you don't make it happen, it won't happen. Like
mm,
there's this sort of like, it's almost like a anxious, panicky sort of like, oh God, like I'm out of breath. Like, what am I gonna do? I better, right? And that there's a tightness, both a mental sort of tightness and a sort of this physical tightness in our bodies as well, right? That happen.
yeah, that's so great. I want to practice that. I have some interesting kind of like shallow breathing issues where I notice throughout the day, like I'll have a hard time getting a full breath. And so then I almost have to like force it. Um, and so I wonder if kind of retraining my breath that way, trying to kind of I imagine it's a
I'm
more
telling you, I'm
natural
to
breath.
yes, it do it. It will work.
Yeah,
I've been doing that, right? So it's only Tuesday now, so it's not that much practice. But like out walking, and I'm like, oh hey, I noticed that shallow because I have that same thing. It was been a sort of a I wouldn't say persistent, but it comes up every now and then, right? Where I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I'm having that shallow breathing thing, right? I can't get my breath any lower, and this has totally already helped a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah.
was like, I gotta go talk to my doctor, like I'll try breathing
Well,
first.
you know what? I'm just telling you what your doctor already said.
It's true, right? Yeah. The
Different type
spiritual
of doctor.
doctor.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
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 for sure.
absolutely. Well,
Hey,
so
thanks for sharing that.
yeah, absolutely. There's all kinds of other good stuff, but let's not make it about that. I'm very curious about you, Jack. I haven't seen you in 2 weeks now.
I know it's been a couple weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I attended Sunday the Lama's talk on Sunday and found that really interesting on Buddha nature. And what's funny is that he was sharing about the kind of what's the word, adventitious is what he used, quality of like the kind of negative um actions that we do, that those kind of like evil actions or wrong actions, um those are temporary, those aren't lasting, whereas the Buddha nature, that's like universal, that's we can't lose it. And it was so interesting because I had this question for like forming in my mind, that it was kind of like based off of my experience growing up, that like that was the other way around, right? That like, actually we're born sinful and we have to work to, get grace from God to be able to get those qualities, right?
yeah,
And how funny that like the first question that was asked was from you, right? And it was basically that, right? Where it's like,
right.
well, if the positive qualities of Buddha nature is permanent, why aren't the negative kind of qualities permanent? And I'm still kind of chewing on his answer, and I don't think that he was trying to give us a firm answer either way, right? Other
I
than just,
agree. I think
yeah,
he gave us a little bit to ponder there to work it out a
yeah,
little bit for ourselves. Uh,
yeah, for
but
sure.
yeah, it was funny because I actually had to look up. We often the word adventitious appears, here and there in writings, and I was like, wait, is that advantageous? No, adventitious.
Uh,
They're different things. And so I did a
uh-huh.
quick little just to confirm. I was like, what is it? Yeah, am I understanding it correctly? And then I was like, all right, yeah, it means temporary, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, so that was interesting. And yeah, I think my training with the four opponent powers has been very helpful. Um, I've been doing Tara practice, trying to do some kind of Tara related practice every day, whether it's just mantras or the actual sadhana.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I really, I appreciate her energy
Mm.
in my life.
Ah,
Um, the little shrine area that we have at the temple, sometimes I think about just kind of sitting in front of it, like I'll imagine it, kind of visualize it in my mind. Um, and see like the statue and all the paintings and whatnot. Um, and it can really be calming for me. And I think Lama really, Lama is such a Tara kind of figure,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, um, because he's never kind of to me he's always embodied both like the masculine and the feminine, and in some ways I think he brings out the feminine even more at times, and really um encouraging that through our prayers, like he's added in prayers from like
Yes.
the female buddhas and
Right.
whatnot. And uh he also he often says that he has like grandmother energy,
Yeah, it's true.
which I totally feel that, um and so yeah, just Tara has, since really the time that I came to the temple, I think that they right before I came, they had a Tara kind of empowerment. And so people were doing the practice regularly, and so I was introduced to it pretty quickly, and attended a session with one of our friends, Dirk, and he kind of led some Tara practice. And I remember feeling just like, this is weird, but I also really like it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
her presence, her energy is just so powerful. And I also really love like the poem, the prayer to 21 Taras that's in the sadhana. All of her different qualities of
Hmm.
compassion, ranging from like just the ultimate grandmotherly compassion to very wrathful compassion.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so cool. And I kind of, what I try and do is I try and imagine where all of that resides within me, right? Because I'm kind like,
Right.
that's the idea, is
Right.
I'm trying to bring this Tara quality out in me. And
Yeah.
so where do I sense that? Where has that been strong in me? Where can I tap into it? Um, and so I love that praise to 21 Taras. But anyways, yeah,
I have
that's
a
been
question
kind of,
about that. So I do the I start my week on Monday mornings, early in the morning at the temple in the shrine room with Tara, right? Where I'm like,
yeah,
where I'm, is it called a shrine room? Whatever, whatever that little space is. Yeah.
yeah,
And it was interesting when I first started it. I remember thinking, man, I like all the pictures of Tara, but the statue there, I'm not so sure about. She looks different. If
yeah,
anybody is listening, you don't know, there's a very special statue of Tara, one of a kind at the
yeah,
Dona Darje temple in Sacramento. And she looks quite different than all of the others. And at first I
she
was a little
does.
like, oh, I don't know. But I've spent so much time with her.
Yes.
And I'm so I spent so much time like looking at her, right? And what's amazing now is exactly what you said. I actually I when I if I mean even inadvertently I'm thinking about Tara, that's who shows up, right?
Mm,
Is is that statue.
yeah,
It's really
yeah,
and it has just grown on me so much. Now I have this very sort of special feeling towards it.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ways that our teacher is really just so subtly powerful, is that there's these ways that he just kind of like will shift something for us. And because I felt the same way when I first saw the statues, I was like, that doesn't look like the kind of like gorgeous,
No,
like young, youthful
no.
Tara that I'm used to seeing. But the more that I sat with it and the more that I imagined her, that there is this kind of grandmotherly quality to the statue, and her eyes too. I think the eyes of that
Yes.
statue are really, I mean, there's something just so magnetic. And I think, Lama's intention with, or, my guess is that the intention was to be more about, what is this kind of connection that I have with this
Yeah.
being and this statue, rather than kind
Right.
of being overwhelmed by the beauty, which is
Yeah.
important, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When we're approaching the Buddhas, but to that's kind of like, what, yeah, what is the connection, as well as like what kind of like um habitual patterns are showing up, when I see this different statue. I don't know if he even intended for it to look that way, right? But I'm
Who
I'm kind
knows?
of,
But my goodness,
I'm
I agree with you 100%.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh, cool. I'm glad that yeah, that's great that you get to spend time with her a lot.
I couldn't agree more. The only question I have, and I have Darshan and Lama tomorrow, maybe I'll ask him if I can remember, but in the praises, there's one where, so Tara is usually described with left leg, or shown left leg bent and right extended, right? Because she's ready to act quickly for the benefit of beings. But one of them, her right leg is bent and her left is extended.
Yeah.
Any idea what that's about?
I don't. I've made kind of guesses, like, and I believe that that's with one of the wrathful ones.
That makes
I'm pretty
sense. It's
sure.
like kind of the opposite. Like she's ready to
Yeah.
step in and kick some ass.
Right, right. Yeah, that's been my guess because
Yeah.
I've also wondered. Um,
If I get an
yeah,
answer, I'll let you know.
yeah, let us know. And it's interesting too, like when the one where it's like the right leg out, everything else about her body is kind of like tilting towards the right too, like there's her hand kind of
Hmm.
offering like everything that we all need. And even this kind of symbol is going out towards the right. She's leaning that way. And so yeah, it's like this kind of um she's stepping towards us, right? Everything is going towards us. We just have to
Hmm.
kind of meet her, be
Oh
willing to meet
yeah.
her.
Oh yeah. One thing I want to say from Lama's talk about this that I thought was so cool was how he was saying, yeah, here we are, we're finding Tara's qualities inside of us and all of that is good, good. But also you might meet Tara, right? And not the Tara inside, the one that's us. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you might meet this, this like not it's like we don't own that energy. It's not our energy. We don't, like even though this process of identifying those qualities in ourselves, that's good and important, right? But that there's also like that's an active force, right? It's alive. The whole thing's alive, right? And there's this energy there, and it may present itself in a way that may feel a little foreign or otherly.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of like comes in,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah. She
here I
might
am. What are
show
you gonna
up.
do
We've
with
talked
it?
about her before. She does show up quite quickly.
She does. Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, should we do some mind training?
Woo! All right. Let's do some mind training with the random Lojong slogan generator on the
Excellent.
lionsroar.dharmacenter.org website. Let's see what we got today. Oh,
All
okay.
right. Number 46. Don't allow three things to diminish. And this is a Charlie Kiabgon is discussing this. The three things are: one, interested humility toward the Kalyanama Mitra, spiritual friend; two, joy in our practice; and three, commitment to the path. Okay, so
All I
not
can say is
allowing.
that is incredibly important. And I'm glad that Traleg Kyabgon started with number one. You know,
Mm,
I think that maintaining the interest in our spiritual friend, in our case, we're talking about our teacher, Lama Yeshe Jinpa, right? And one of the things that I've noticed is, so notice how it says interested humility, right? Like
yeah,
I find that fascinating, but
me too.
there are times that like doubts will creep in where there's this sort of like, well, but he's just some other guy, he's just a
Mm-hmm.
human being like everybody else, which is true, just a human being like everybody, like in that sense, right? And then there's this like, am I, does this make sense? Am I being foolish? Is this silly to, to be so, so interested in him,
Mm,
right? And then
mm,
what I find really interesting is when I'm honest with myself, and I look at it, I'm like, I have never in my life met a wiser, more compassionate, more honest person than him. Never. I have yet. Like I've met a lot of people, never met anybody quite like that. And
yeah,
furthermore, when I think about behavior that benefits many beings, right, or all beings, and I think like how much he has dedicated so much of his energy, so much of his life force to benefiting other beings. The way his work, his
everything.
career, everything, right? Is like he's really given it up. He's like, here, I'm doing it. And I find
Yeah,
it inspirational because those little nagging little thoughts, right? It's important to address them, right? And to not just sort of override them or whatever, because we don't want to be foolish here, right? But
yeah,
that aspect of maintaining both the interest and some humility and recognizing not like a power difference, like, oh, you're my master, or, not like that kind of thing, but rather like you're a master of this way, that I so badly want to travel, right? You are an
Yeah,
expert on this path. Like, and that's humbling, right? Because I
it
recognize
is
like, man,
humbling.
I'm not even a novice, you know what I mean?
Yeah, me too.
I barely recognize that there is a path and I'd like to be on it, right? Compared to him,
Yeah,
you know? And so I think that that number one to me is one of the most important ones.
for sure. Yeah, another thing that really helps inspire that interest and that humility for me is knowing a little bit about Lama's kind of like conventional self and where he came from, because he really could have been incredibly powerful and wealthy, like with the family that he came from. And he chose to not take that, right? Like he couldn't live that life. Just like the Buddha, the Buddha had all the power and wealth that, that anyone could have had at that time. But he couldn't live that life. And so, I think that really inspires confidence in me to know a little bit about Lama's family, that they're kind
Yeah.
of, I don't know exactly what they were doing, but Lama at one point said, I could have been one of like the rulers, like the, in some ways, like the capitalist of the world,
Yeah,
right?
he could have joined the Doge Club.
Exactly, right. These, yeah, very powerful, very wealthy people. And he abandoned that, like all that power because it's nothing, right? Compared to what he's
Yeah.
developed. And so that really inspires me, and humbles me, right? Because like I have all of this turmoil in my life around like, um, how can I get some level of uh, financial kind of like, satisfaction or so on and so forth. And it's like, it just really doesn't matter. Yeah, be comfortable, like get enough
Yeah.
finances to be able to practice, right? To be able to do my practice, pay the rent, eat, so on and so forth. But yeah, so that's great. And two, joy in our practice. That's one I need to always be cultivating. That's one I've talked about so many times. My Dharma name is Yeshi Laki, goddess of joy. So that is what I'm working on because I don't have a lot of joy naturally. And so joy in the practice in particular, I think is especially important to me, um, because I can really try and find joy like out here. Like I think that, okay, if I can just get enough of this, right? Like if I can go out dancing enough, or like, have enough time
Hmm.
with my partner, right? All these external things, then I'll have some level of joy. I still think that way, even now, right?
Yeah.
So reminder that joy in my practice, that is where it is. Those external things aren't bad, but they don't actually bring me lasting happiness.
Yeah, temporary pleasures are, they're fine.
They're fine. Yeah,
It's
they're good.
okay.
They're
I
fine.
like them, but
Yeah,
when I've chased them and I've tried to rely on them, um,
right.
it has not worked out so well for me, or for
Right.
other people impacted by by me. Um, so it's good to allow them to take a little bit of a back seat, in terms of
Yeah,
our focus, and recognize that this right here is we're really talking about lasting happiness, deep
lasting happiness.
contentment, peace, joy, and that's not something external. It can't be had outside.
Yeah. And we also can't lose it.
Can't lose it.
Yeah.
Can get covered up though, Jack,
It can, oh, it sure gets covered up. Yeah.
but only by
Ooh, easily.
adventitious stains.
That's right. That's a good reminder. And then lastly, that commitment, commitment to the path. We're doing it.
We're doing it.
We're doing
Stay
it.
with it.
Is this Kalachakra?
We don't know. These are
We don't know.
tantric enlightened beings.
Sweet.
I like this one.
I like it too. Yeah, what do you like about it in
I
particular?
just, I think that because it's not like a statue, it's not kind of a normal conventional like tanka or painting or statue. I like that. I like that it's sort of both there and also not there. It's faded, you
Oh
know?
yeah, huh.
And
That
so
is cool.
that fading sort of like I feel like it gives it sort of additional significance.
Yeah.
And I love all the arms
Hell yeah.
and the sensuality of it, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
uh
Yep.
yeah,
Arms, butts.
yeah, all of it, the whole thing.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks to Dirk for always putting some great art on these. It's fantastic. Yeah. Daniel, this has already been a really I think concentrated discussion tonight. We talked
Yeah.
about Tara a lot, our teacher, and now we're going to talk about Reliance, which, we've been talking about these holy beings, right? Tara, our teacher. And so it's a good segue into our conversation tonight.
Yeah.
Um, so as we talked about earlier, the first opponent power was regret. And so in that one, you're reflecting on actions that you engaged in over the day or over lifetime or past lifetimes, that you regret, that you wish, like, okay, I don't want to do that anymore. I recognize that it's harmful. Um, and so therefore I regret that. I don't want to do that anymore. Um, and then this next step that we're going to be talking about, reliance, um, is really kind of like about identifying what are actual, like, valid bases, of confidence, for carrying on, um, positive and helpful activity, that will actually allow us to progress, on the path that we've chosen to be on. Um, and so kind of, rather than relying on things that don't actually give lasting happiness, or on things that, like, actively bring ourselves and others harm, we want to rely on beings, both holy and, everyday sentient beings, to yeah, to help us purify our negative karma. So yeah, that's kind of like the broad overview.
Good job.
Thank
That was a really wonderful description of Reliance.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
That's nicely done.
But yeah, I see this question you wrote here is, what does reliance mean to you? And I'd love to hear a little bit of the, maybe, uh yeah, maybe not so religious, but kind of, yeah, what is reliance?
Yeah, you know, it's something that I've been pondering a bit, you know, like what really does it mean to me? And it kind of the way that that question presents itself to me is so I recognize, of course, yes, we are all in this sort of cosmic ingredients in this cosmic blender or whatever, and we're all interconnected and, you know, yeah, yes, that. Um, and yet I still have a very strong sense of I'm doing this. I can do this. Oh, I don't need anybody. I don't need help. I can do this. I got this. I got this. And that's just ignorance. That's just ignorance, right? Like it turns out like everybody is relying on something, right? Like you
Yeah,
cannot exist in this world without relying on others, right? If nothing else, you know, to provide electricity and water and food and that kind of thing, right? The support that we need is what we rely on, right?
yeah,
And that's like the basic sort of reliance. And then there's like all right, but then even if I'm just talking about myself, what am I relying on? I'm relying on, unfortunately, in many cases, I'm relying on like routine, habit patterns, various sort of conditioned ways of thinking, right?
mm-hmm,
Where I like, for example, I was thinking, I was like, I really have, over the course of my life, relied on my thoughts, which is which is
yeah.
really not a good idea, right?
It's not, I know.
Of all
Same
the mo
here.
of all the like if you look at your thoughts, if you just watch them for a little bit, you begin to realize there's nothing reliable about a thought,
Mm-mm.
right?
No, they're not.
Right. And
Same
yeah,
thing with moods and
oh,
emotions too.
oh Yeah, for sure. All of that reactive behavior and all these things, that I'm like, yeah, that's how it is. And it's good, like it's like that's how I am in this world, right? That's what I
Yeah.
depend on for my understanding of how to interact with other beings and whatnot. And so like that's the kind of like reliance, that's kind of what reliance has meant to me in the past. And unfortunately, still does, right? And I was
Yeah.
thinking that reliance, sort of within the religious framework, I was thinking like reliance and refuge are kind of synonymous in some sense, right? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and so and I that found it really helpful to think about it, like, oh, I'm taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I am relying on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? And so I like thinking about it that way because it's a little bit easier because I'm like, oh, that the reliance part makes more sense to me than the refuge part of it, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so yeah, I think that's kind of what it means to me. What about you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that about reliance and refuge, because for me, when I'm doing the actual practice of the four opponent powers, the way that I take reliance on like the holy beings is that I actually take refuge.
Yeah.
Like I do the refuge prayer. So, I'm thinking about my guru, I'm thinking about the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and saying, I am recognizing that I have a problem, right? It's kind of like I'm thinking of like 12 step. Right? I'm
Yes.
recognizing that I have a problem,
Right.
right? And
Yes.
I'm seeing that it's out of my control and that I have to rely on these beings, right? This kind of higher power
Higher
in like the
power. That's right.
recovery language,
Yes.
where it's like that is actually where it's at. And it's interesting to bringing up the 12 steps in the Vajrasattva sadhana that Lama created for our temple. There's 12 steps. He takes us through 12 steps in the Vajrasattva sadhana, and so it's kind of like an expanded four opponent powers. It's really
Uh-huh.
cool.
Yeah.
So we'll
Yeah.
have to look at that sometime. Um, but yeah, so I definitely see reliance as refuge, and that the Dharma is like my real source of freedom. That I don't have, I don't have any other source of freedom. Like when I really look at it, it's like all these ways that I seek freedom elsewhere. I cannot find it. And so, the Dharma is really where I found any kind of relief from this just crazy, roller coaster that I'm on.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, but you mentioned, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you were talking about recovery, right? Because I was thinking
yeah,
the exact same
yes,
thing, that the biggest problem in recovery, in the 12-step recovery program, the biggest sort of obstacle that most people encounter is the higher power one.
yes,
And there's all kinds of workarounds, of course, that people come up with for
yep,
workarounds for a higher power, just to kind of get you over the the
yeah,
conceptual barrier, right? But isn't it fascinating that Lama, has said any number of times, and I remember him telling me directly, saying the reason why most people fail and leave, this path is because they can't do it alone,
yeah,
right? And
right,
it's the same thing, the same reason people quit 12-step programs because they can't believe in a higher power. They've doing the same thing that I just described, relying on things that are completely unreliable. Relying on, I mean, alcohol,
right.
drugs, not reliable,
Not
right?
reliable.
Not some,
How quickly they move through our system and then just make, everything 10 times worse.
yeah, they are reliable for screwing things up,
That's true.
but if that's not the direction you want to go, right,
Yeah.
then you have to rely on something else. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, and and like you said, we can't rely just on our own kind of like, what I think Lama would say is like bootstrap dharma, where
Yes.
like the cowboy dharma,
Cowboy Dharma. Yeah.
right? Where it's like I'm gonna do this on my own, like I'm just gonna muscle up and like just white knuckle it, and I'm gonna get out of this myself. And it's so unnecessary. And also I think genuinely impossible, except for maybe like a handful of people over eons of times who have been able to do it on their own, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's like that recognition of interdependence, that I I only exist because others exist, and deciding like, okay, these are valid things for me to rely on because I've seen how they operate in my life just with like the very little time and practice that I've had,
Yeah. Yeah.
how much they've transformed my experience. Um, and then the set, like kind of the second form of reliance, which I found really interesting as I was uh, researching this, is reliance on sentient beings, and specifically those beings that I have in some way harmed, maybe directly or maybe even indirectly through my thoughts. Maybe I have, like, for example, I have very kind of divisive, hateful feelings about certain people in the world right now. um, and yet every single sentient being has Buddha nature, and I cannot exclude any one of them from full enlightenment because eventually they're going to get there. And so my bodhicitta can't exclude anyone,
No,
even the Elon Musks of the world,
no,
right?
no.
And so, there's this reliance that, like, okay, my liberation depends on me being able to open up my heart to every single sentient being.
Well, yeah, and your
So,
liberation depends on the development of wisdom and compassion, right? And it would be impossible for anyone to develop compassion without the suffering of sentient beings.
right.
So you need
Yeah.
them. You
Yeah,
can't walk
we
this
do.
path without, suffering beings.
Yep.
If you don't
Right.
have, people doing bad things and causing harm in this world, what do you got to work with?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what would you? It
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense.
It
Yeah.
does, it wouldn't make any sense at all. No.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun. What I do sometimes, so after I take refuge in Guru Buddha Dharma Sangha, I then do the Bodhisattva prayer, right? Which is, I think that's the next one that we do. Whereas, I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. By the positive potential I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And so I'll do that 3 times while I'm envisioning. So I've got the holy objects. And then I also have the people who my particular, negative thoughts or even harmful actions I've directed towards those. I see them in front of me. So the last week, I've been seeing Elon Musk a lot. I've been seeing Donald Trump. I've been seeing, maybe clients that I felt annoyed by, like
Yeah.
when I'm in session and I'm like, oh, that's not great. I need to have compassion for those people. And so it's kind of like it's this beautiful little world that I can create where I'm like, you know what? I see your humanity. I see your struggles, and I I respect you inherently as a sentient being. And so I'm choosing to rely on you for my liberation, for the hopes that I can help liberate you as well and help you on your path, right? So it's kind of this, it's just turning the mind again, right? Over and
Yes,
over. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course you might move on to the four immeasurables, right?
Yeah.
Which are easy enough to say, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, so on and so forth. And then it might be a little bit more challenging to say, may I be the cause for all sentient beings' happiness, right? And then it'd be
Mm.
really interesting to be like to do the four immeasurables with one particular negative person in mind, one of these people, challenging people in mind, where you're like, and may I be the cause of Elon Musk's happiness? May I be the
Yeah.
cause of the elimination of the Elon Musk's suffering,
Of
so on,
his suffering.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
more
sure.
just keep turning the mind, right? Notice.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's this way that it's like I feel just how like linked I am to everyone, including him,
Do you
right?
notice it just that practice, what you described, it it just it doesn't take away anything from the wrongness of actions, right?
Mm, hmm.
It doesn't it does it's not washing away anything. It's not actually ignoring it.
Yep.
None of that. It's not negating it. It's not, none of that. What it is doing, though, is relaxing our tight little
Mm,
attachment to our perception about the entire thing, right? And
yeah.
that like after you do a practice like that, you notice you're like,
Mm,
I was holding on to a bunch of stuff there, right?
yeah.
Things still are the way they are, right? The goodness, the rightness, the wrongness, whatever. Things are still the way they are, right? Nothing changed there, but our heart, our mind, our experience as it relates to these beings changes dramatically.
Yeah. Right. Right, because when you think about it, like if I'm harboring those like negative, hateful thoughts, it's not getting to the object that I think that I want it to get to, right? So it's not even harming the person that I in the moment want it to harm.
Right? They
The-
say it's like drinking poison hoping that it'll kill the other
yes,
person.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and so it's that exactly right is that the only person who's being harmed is me and
Right.
maybe the people around me who are feeling the
Sure.
effects of my negativity,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a tempting poison though, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It is. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of in line with what we were talking, what Lama was talking about on Sunday about how important it is for us to not to wish to take revenge.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, like that that desire to avenge a wrong or whatever has to be dealt with. It's going to
Yeah.
cause us a lot of harm.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because he reminded us that like uh the Dalai Lama, he feels anger,
Yeah,
right? The Dalai Lama has written about that he experiences emotions, but the important thing is to not take revenge,
right.
to allow the wisdom mind to arise alongside the emotional mind, and to yeah, not take revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, huh? It's good stuff, isn't it? It's medicinal.
It's weird to me because it is exactly what we were saying earlier in the show about how the normal road to happiness that most people consider are these eight worldly concerns that we've talked about in the past, right? And striving for temporary pleasures and
Mm,
rewards and things out, relationships and things outside of us, a good job, lots of money or whatever. In all of human history, there's been no evidence that that has led to lasting peace and happiness for the people who had those things. Not saying they're bad or anything, just like it didn't lead to lasting peace and happiness for the people.
yeah.
And yet
They all died.
they definitely all died. There's that. And while they were alive, they suffered. You
Yeah.
know. Um, and then you compare that to people who really are, walking this path, who have really committed themselves to it. And it's clear as day that those beings have deep peace, contentment, and joy. They're not always laughing, they're not always experiencing great pleasures and things like that. Yeah, no, no, not that. But they do have peace, they do have joy,
Yeah, they do.
lasting happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically of well, one, our teacher, but also Geshe Sewang.
Me too. Me too. I just
Yeah.
before we started this, I lit a little piece of incense here that I got from him. I love
Oh, beautiful.
I was like, I love thinking about Geshe Sewang
Me too.
and the times that I've, got to spend with him because he's a manifestation of what we just talked about.
He really is. yeah, it's just that stable, grounded joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Easy going.
easy going, yeah. I don't and easygoing and yet so incredibly powerful in his ability to take action in the world,
Oh
right? Just
yeah.
like our teacher, that
Right.
the busy, but not busy in the way that like I get busy, where I'm distracting myself.
Right.
Busy in the way that every single action that they take is for the benefit of others, and they
I
take a
want to
lot of those actions.
I want to be like that.
Oh,
I want to increase my
yeah,
capacity to do that and actually do it, you know? Like, and we are.
yeah.
But, like I want to get to that
I
point.
know. I know. I think that's good to have that desire, right? That's like, the Lojong slogan that we just read is that commitment to that path and that enthusiasm for the path. And how helpful it is to see people ahead of us.
Well, and what I think is good too, it's semi-related, I think, is, rejoicing in the virtuous actions of all beings, right? And when we see and talk about people like Geshe Seiwang or our teacher Lama Jinpa, we can really reflect on it and be like we can experience some of that joy ourselves if we really
Yes.
if we rejoice in their virtuous actions. It's interesting the way that our mind stream benefits in a sort of this joyous way as a result of rejoicing in their actions, right?
Yeah.
We get to participate in it just by simply having gratitude and happiness that they exist in this world and are here to do what they're doing.
Yeah. Right.
Isn't that
Yeah, and
wild?
that's reliance.
I know.
That's reliance. Yes. Oh, well, my friend, this has been so nice. I feel encouraged, and I'm gonna keep doing this purification practice.
Me too. Me too. I think we'll purify some of those adventitious stains and then we'll get a good glimpse at that Buddha nature. And so
Yeah,
will everyone else.
that's right. We're gonna keep going.
Do it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. If you can make a donation, that's lionsroaddharmacenter.org. We'd super appreciate it. And otherwise, we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Jack. Bye, everybody.
Daniel, bye.
Bye.